Hey everyone, it's Summer Rayne from Homestead, Brooklyn, and it's time for your questions. So the first one today is from Janelle S. She says, I see you have some ivy in your home, but I'm under the impression it's best outdoors, but yours seem to be healthy. Is putting ivy by a window good enough? Thank you very much, Janelle, for your question. So the ivy that I have in my windows is definitely a type of Hedera, so it's an English ivy, and there's some different varieties of Hedera in the window. And I have them in a north-facing window, and what I do with my north-facing windows, even though that's not the best light that an ivy could get, I have mirrors on the edges of my window to bring in more light. It seems to be very happy there, but I should say that as soon as the ivy hits a wall, it begins to lose its leaves, which totally makes sense. And as soon as the ivy is back in the window again, the leaves are there. And if I were a plant, I think that totally makes sense for me, especially a light-loving plant, because you wouldn't really want to be putting your solar panels behind shadows, a shadowy wall. So why don't you spend that energy putting the leaves or your solar panels where the light is? So I've had that ivy probably growing now for, I would say, almost like 6 years in the window, maybe 5 years, 6 years. So it seems to be very pleasant. So as I've experimented, sure, ivy in the home absolutely works. I also have some Hedera species in the south-facing window. That one actually has been hit by a little bit of the brown scale, which is a type of insect. And I was debating whether I should cut it back. It's been growing for about 5 or 6 years, but it doesn't seem to have been so affected that I, need to remove it. So I've actually just left it in. And I also have something that looks like an ivy. It has ivy-shaped leaves that I just got, called a Senecio macroglossus. It's actually a waxed ivy plant, but it's a little bit more like a succulent, and I've found that to be such a good grower. So you can have things that look like ivy if you don't have a tremendous amount of light, and actually get ivy looking plants that grow in a very similar manner to the ivy that I have. So thank you again for that question. The next one is from Kitty Cat Bar. How often do you switch out plants in your vertical garden, assuming you do? So the question is, do I switch out plants in my vertical garden? And the answer is yes. I actually switch out plants in lots of different places in my house, and not just in the vertical garden. I think with the vertical garden, what I've found is that when a plant starts to grow, it begins to shade out the plant that's to the left of it, typically, because towards the right of the plant is my south-facing window, and then towards the left it's a little bit further away from the light. So I think with anything in the house, you have to always constantly be diligent and vigilant about what is shading out whom. Is it getting the optimum conditions? And so I'm always kind of in constant motion with my plants. With the vertical garden in particular, it's about cutting it back, clipping it back. So I have some philodendrons and some pothos that begin to grow downwards. So sometimes I'll take cuttings, because once they reach my floor, it gets a little bit, the plants could get damaged on the floor. So I try not to have it grow on the floor too much. And they also shade out the plants that were around it or below it. And there's been some plants in there. I think the green wall or the vertical garden is now maybe 3 or 4 years old now, if I'm not mistaken. And there's some plants that I've had in there since the beginning. So, and there's some that didn't actually do so well. So I found that crotons don't actually grow incredibly well within the vertical garden, in my vertical garden system. So I think it's a lot like with anything, it's a little trial and error. The plants that I found grow really well are philodendrons, pothos, calatheas, just members of the Marantis family, grow really well. I have some dracaenas in there. I have a Hawaiian wedding vine. I'm blanking on the scientific name of that. It used to be called Stephanotis, but I think it was just actually changed over. the genus was recently changed over, and I can't remember what the genus is, but it's a beautiful vine. It actually gets these really beautiful white tubular flowers on. You typically buy them when they are flowering. It's very hard to get them to flower again, especially in a house in the Northeast, but they push out some really beautiful vines, and when they do flower, it smells similarly to a jasmine. And I have a number of other different types of varieties and species in there, but those are some of the best ones off the top of my head. So hopefully that answered your question and many more. And if you haven't yet, tune into our Instagram account at Homestead Brooklyn, and feel free to send your questions there or below in the videos, and we'll get them answered as much as I can. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe on the channel. Looking forward. Bye.